You have to pay now. I don't have it. Look at this. Take it. I can't.
Nobody told Ethan the porch step had rotted through. He felt it give slightly under his shoe as he climbed toward the front door. And for a moment he just stood there, looking down at the splintered wood, trying to reconcile it with the house in his memory. The one with fresh paint every spring. The one his money was supposed to be keeping whole. 10 years he'd been gone. 10 years of wiring a portion of every paycheck home, certain it was buying his parents comfort, new appliances, doctor visits, maybe a vacation or two. He'd pictured it so many times on long flights and longer nights at the office. His mother in a sunlit kitchen, his father napping in some new recliner, both of them safe because of what he'd built for them from 3,000 miles away. The door opened before he could knock. His father stood there, and Ethan's breath caught somewhere in his chest. Robert had always been a big man, broad through the shoulders, the kind of presence that filled a doorway. Now his shirt hung loose on him. His hands, resting on the frame, trembled slightly, not with age exactly, but with something closer to nerves. Ethan. The word came out rough, unrehearsed. They embraced, and Ethan felt how thin his father had become beneath the fabric. When they pulled apart, Robert's eyes flicked toward the hallway table, then quickly away, toward a drawer he pushed shut with his hip. Casual, too casual, the way a man moves when he's trying not to be noticed moving at all. Come in, Robert said, already turning. Your mother's in the kitchen. She'll want to see you. Ethan followed him inside, stepping over a threshold that used to feel like home, wondering why his father's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Linda hugged him at the kitchen doorway, and for a moment the years fell away, her hands cupping his face the way they had when he was 7, her eyes bright with tears she didn't bother hiding. But when she stepped back, Ethan noticed how loosely her wedding ring finger sat bare of anything but a faint pale line where a ring used to be. He didn't ask about it yet, not with his father watching. Later, while Robert napped in the living room, Ethan wandered the house on his own, the way you do when something feels unfinished. He found himself in the small study, drawn by curiosity more than suspicion, and opened the drawer his father had pushed shut so quickly. Bills. A dozen of them at least, envelopes stamped in red, some already opened and refolded as if to hide how bad the numbers inside had gotten. Beneath them, a pharmacy bag with 3 prescription bottles, each one nearly empty, each one dated weeks before a refill should have been needed. He carried one bottle into the kitchen and set it on the counter without a word. Linda's hands stilled over the dish she was washing. That's just, your father likes to stretch things out. He's careful. Careful how? He splits the pills sometimes, to make them last. She said it too lightly, the way people talk when they've rehearsed sounding fine. Mom, his insulin isn't something he stretches. She didn't answer. Her hands, wet from the sink, had begun to shake, and she turned back to the water as if scrubbing a plate hard enough might wash the question away entirely. Ethan stepped out onto the back porch to make the call, phone pressed to his ear, watching the yard his father used to keep so carefully now overtaken by weeds along the fence line. Ryan picked up on the 3rd ring, his voice warm and easy, the voice of a man with nothing on his mind. Hey, little brother, you made it back okay? I'm here. Ethan kept his own voice level. Ryan, what's going on with Mom and Dad? A pause, brief enough that most people wouldn't have caught it. What do you mean? They're fine. Dad's cutting his insulin in half. There are unpaid bills in a drawer. Mom's not wearing her ring. Okay, look, things have been tight lately for everyone. You know how it is. Ryan's tone shifted into something practiced, a rhythm Ethan recognized now that he was listening for it. The same reassurances he'd heard on dozens of calls over the years, phrases that had always slid past him easily before. Asterisk, don't worry about it. I've got it handled. They're doing better than you think. Asterisk. Tight how? I've been sending money every month for 10 years. I know. And it's helped, Ethan, it really has. There's just costs add up. The house, the medical stuff, Dad's appointments. Ryan spoke quickly now, stacking explanations on top of each other, the way people did when they were building a wall rather than answering a question. Ethan said nothing for a moment, letting the silence stretch. "I should probably get back," Ryan said eventually. "Long day. We'll talk more this weekend, yeah?" The line went dead before Ethan could respond. He stood there with the phone still against his ear, the dial tone humming faintly, and realized for the first time in 10 years that he didn't believe a word his brother had just told him. The kitchen cupboards told their own story, once Ethan started looking properly. Half a bag of rice, 2 cans of soup, 1 dented, a nearly empty jar of instant coffee his mother used to buy in bulk 3 at a time because she liked knowing she'd never run out. He remembered a pantry that used to overflow, jars of preserves she canned every summer, shelves stocked enough to feed a holiday gathering on short notice. Now there was barely enough for a week. He moved through the house room by room, no longer just noticing things but counting them the way a man audits a business he suspects is failing. In the dining room, a rectangle of unfaded wallpaper caught his eye, brighter than the wall around it, framed by 4 small nail holes. He stood in front of it for a long moment before he placed what had hung there. His grandfather's clock, the one that used to chime on the hour, the one Linda always said would be passed down someday. "Mom," he called, "where's the clock from the dining room?" She appeared in the doorway, drying her hands on a towel, and her eyes went to the wall before she answered. "Oh, that. We had it serviced. It's, at the shop." "Which shop?" "I don't remember the name." Ryan handled it. Of course he had. Ethan was starting to notice a pattern in every answer his mother gave. A name attached to it, always the same name, always followed by a reason that sounded reasonable enough on its own, but strange stacked next to the others. He returned to the study that evening and pulled the drawer open again, this time reading every bill in full, searching the dates, the amounts, the gaps, looking for the shape of where 10 years of money had actually gone. Ethan found Walter Higgins trimming his hedge the next morning, the same hedge that had separated the 2 properties since before Ethan was born. "Ethan Mitchell." Walter set down his shears, grinning. "Look at you. Been a long time." They talked for a few minutes about nothing in particular. The weather, how much the neighborhood had changed, a new family 2 houses down. It was easy, familiar, the kind of conversation Ethan hadn't realized he'd missed until he was having it. Then Walter glanced past him, toward the back acreage that bordered the tree line. "Shame about the north lot, though. Folks around here always figured that'd stay in your family." Ethan felt something go still in his chest. "What do you mean?" "The land out back. Heard it sold back in the spring. Some developer's been out there surveying." Walter said it plainly, the way you mention any small piece of local news, with no idea he just knocked the floor out from under the man standing in front of him. "Sold to who?" "Couldn't tell you. Ryan handled it, I think. Saw him out there with some fella in a suit a while back." Ethan managed something close to a normal goodbye, and then walked back toward the house on legs that didn't quite feel like his own. That land had been in the family for 3 generations. His father had always said it would never be sold. Not while he was alive. It was the one thing he'd been firm about, the one line he wouldn't cross no matter how tight money got. And Ethan had never signed anything. No call, no paperwork, no conversation about it at all. Which meant either his father had changed his mind without telling him, or someone else had made that decision for him. Ethan didn't call this time. He drove. Ryan's house sat in a newer development across town, the kind with a 2-car garage and a lawn cut in tidy, even stripes. Ethan noticed the landscaping before anything else. Freshly mulched, professionally done, and felt something bitter rise in him at the contrast between this yard and the one he'd just left. Ryan opened the door with a beer already in hand, his smile faltering slightly when he saw Ethan's face. "Hey, wasn't expecting. The land's gone, Ryan." Ryan's expression flickered, just for a second, before settling into something more composed. "What are you talking about?" "The north lot. Walter Higgins told me it's sold in the spring. To a developer." Ethan stepped past him into the entryway without being invited. "I never signed anything." "So who did?" "Look, it's complicated. Dad wanted. Dad told me himself, years ago, that land wasn't ever going anywhere. So try again. Ryan set the beer down harder than necessary. You weren't here, Ethan. You don't get to swoop in after 10 years and act like you know what's complicated and what isn't. Things happen. Decisions get made. By who? Because it wasn't me, and Dad can barely keep his medication straight, so I doubt it was him either. You need to calm down. I need an answer. Ryan's jaw tightened, and for a moment something raw showed through the composure. Not quite panic, but close to it. It was handled the way it needed to be handled. That's all you need to know. That's not an answer. It's the one you're getting. Ryan moved toward the door, opening it pointedly. I've got somewhere to be. Ethan stood there a moment, searching his brother's face for something honest, and found only a man in a hurry to end a conversation he had no intention of finishing. He walked out without another word, already certain now that whatever Ryan had done, it was worse than either of them had said out loud. It was tucked inside an old recipe box, of all places. A small yellow slip folded into quarters, wedged behind a card for banana bread in his mother's handwriting. Ethan almost missed it. He'd been searching the kitchen for more bills, more evidence, anything that might explain the missing land, when the slip fell out onto the counter as he lifted the box down from its shelf. He unfolded it without much thought. Golden Eagle Pawn and Loan. A description followed, gold band, diamond solitaire engraved, and beneath it, a loan amount that made his stomach turn. He found his mother in the garden, kneeling by a bed of wilted tulips she hadn't had the energy to tend properly in months. He held the slip out to her without a word. Linda looked at it for a long time before she looked up at him. I was going to get it back, she said quietly. I've been putting a little aside, when I can. Mom, why would you pawn your ring? Her composure, which had held through every deflection of the past few days, finally broke. She sat back on her heels in the dirt, tears coming fast and unguarded. Ryan came to me, said there'd been an emergency, some problem with the business, money he needed fast or he'd lose everything he'd built. He begged me not to tell your father, said it would break his heart to know Ryan was struggling. I didn't know what else to do. When was this? 2 years ago. Maybe more. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of soil across her cheek. I never told anyone. I was ashamed. Your father still doesn't know. Ethan knelt beside her in the dirt, the pawn slip still between his fingers, and felt the last of his doubt about his brother give way entirely to something colder, something closer to certainty. Kevin answered the door looking like a man who'd been expecting this visit for a long time. Ethan hadn't called ahead. He'd driven straight from their parents' house, still carrying the weight of the pawn slip in his jacket pocket, ready for another round of excuses. Kevin had always been the quiet one, easy to overlook, easier still to suspect, the brother who drifted in and out of steady work, who never quite explained where his money went. I figured you'd show up eventually, Kevin said, stepping aside to let him in. Ethan didn't waste time. He laid it all out. The bills, the medication, the land, the ring, watching his younger brother's face for the same practice calm Ryan had worn. Instead, Kevin's shoulders dropped, and something in him seemed to give way all at once. I didn't take any of it, he said. I swear to you, Ethan, I never touched Mom and Dad's money. Then explain the last 2 years. Explain why you never said anything. Kevin sank onto the arm of the couch, running a hand over his face. About 6 years back, I got into some trouble. Gambling. Bad enough that I owed people who don't send polite reminders. His voice caught. Ryan covered it. Never told me where the money came from. I didn't ask because I was scared and grateful and stupid all at once. And after that, he had something on me. Every time I noticed things weren't right with Mom and Dad, every time I almost said something, he'd remind me what I owed him. Not just money. Silence. Kevin's eyes were wet now, ashamed in a way that looked nothing like the calculated deflection Ethan had braced for. I hated myself for it. I still do. But I didn't know how deep it went, Ethan. I swear I didn't know about the land, or Mom's ring, or any of that. Ethan sat down slowly across from him, recalculating everything he thought he understood about his family, aware that Ryan's reach had apparently extended further than either of them had realized. They spread everything across Kevin's kitchen table. The bills, the pawn slip, printouts of bank transfers Ethan had pulled from his own records going back years. "I always assumed you two talked more than we talked," Kevin admitted, sorting through a stack of statements. "Figured you had your own thing going. Successful older brother, off doing his own successful older brother stuff. I sent money every month for a decade and never once asked to see where it went." Ethan said it flatly, more to himself than to Kevin. "I trusted him because he was the one who stayed. He was good at that. Making people feel like trusting him was the only reasonable choice." They worked through the evening, piecing together a timeline neither of them had ever laid out in full before. Kevin remembered a conversation from 3 years back. Ryan mentioning offhand that the land situation was being handled, a phrase that had meant nothing at the time and meant everything now. Ethan cross-referenced dates on his transfers against a folder of receipts Linda had reluctantly handed over, gaps appearing between what he'd sent and what had apparently been spent. "This doesn't add up to a few thousand," Kevin said eventually, staring at the numbers between them. "This looks like a lot more than that." "I know." Neither of them said Ryan's name for a while after that, as if naming him again might make it worse than the numbers already had. "We should talk to a lawyer," Kevin said finally. "Not to go to war. Just to know what we're actually looking at." Ethan nodded, feeling something shift between them, some old resentment loosening its grip in favor of a simpler, sturdier thing. Two brothers finally on the same side of something that mattered. Sarah Bennett's office occupied a modest suite above a bakery downtown. Nothing flashy, just a wall of case files and a woman who listened without interrupting for nearly 20 minutes while Ethan and Kevin laid out everything they knew. When they finished, she set down her pen and studied them both for a moment. "I want to be straightforward with you," she said. "What you're describing isn't just a family dispute. If even half of this holds up, you're looking at financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult and potentially forgery on the land transfer. Those are serious charges. What do we need to prove it?" Ethan asked. "Documentation mostly, the kind that doesn't lie even when people do." She began counting on her fingers. "Bank records showing your transfers and where they actually landed. The original deed and signature on file with the county, so we can compare it against your father's real signature. Any messages between Ryan and either of your parents, or between Ryan and Kevin, that reference money or pressure. And your mother's statement about the ring, if she's willing to give it formally." Kevin shifted in his seat. "She's scared. Ashamed, I think, more than scared. That's common. We'll go gently with her." Sarah made a note. "The land is the piece I'd want to move on fastest. Forged signatures have a paper trail, and paper trails don't forget." Ethan looked at Kevin, then back at Sarah, feeling the reality of what they were starting to settle into something solid. No longer suspicion, no longer a family argument behind closed doors, but a case with evidence and stakes and a shape he could finally see. "Where do we start?" he said. Sarah slid a legal pad across the desk. "With everything you just told me. Write it all down." 3 weeks later, Sarah called them both in. She had a folder waiting on the desk when they sat down, thicker than the one from their first meeting, and she didn't waste time getting to it. "We requested the full transaction history on the account Ryan set up for your parents' care," she said, sliding a spreadsheet across the table. "It took some doing, since he'd closed 2 of the original accounts and opened new ones over the years. But we traced it." Ethan looked down at the columns of numbers, dates running back a full decade, deposits matching almost exactly what he remembered sending. Then, beside each deposit, a second column, withdrawals, transfers, cash advances, most of them within days of the money arriving. "Add it all up," Sarah said quietly, "and the total diverted comes to just under $96,000. The number didn't feel real at first. Ethan had expected something bad. He hadn't expected to see a decade of trust reduced to a single figure sitting cold and exact at the bottom of a page. "That's not counting the land," Sarah continued. "We pulled the deed from the county recorder. The signature on the transfer doesn't match your father's signature on file with the DMV or his medical records. Not close. A forensic document examiner will need to confirm it formally, but I've seen enough forged signatures to recognize one on site. Kevin stared at the spreadsheet without speaking, his jaw tight. So it's not a gray area, Ethan said. This isn't him being careless with money that was technically his to manage. No, Sarah said. This is calculated, sustained, and now it's documented. She closed the folder gently, as if closing it might soften what was inside. I know this isn't easy to sit with, but you came to me because you wanted the truth, whatever it turned out to be. Now you have it. Ethan sat back, the number still hanging in the air between them. No longer a suspicion, but a fact he'd have to find a way to carry. They met at Sarah's office, at her insistence. Neutral ground, she'd called it, though nothing about the room felt neutral once Ryan sat down across from the folder that held 10 years of his choices laid out in black and white. He looked at the spreadsheet for a long time before he spoke. 96,000, he said finally, almost to himself. You made it sound so clinical. It's not a feeling, Ryan. It's a number. Ethan kept his voice steady, though everything in him wanted to raise it, along with a forged signature on land that was never yours to sell. Ryan's composure, the one he'd worn through every phone call and every deflection, finally cracked open. You want to know what it's like, he said, staying. While you were out there building your name, your company, your life, I was here. Every appointment, every emergency, every night Dad's sugar dropped, and I had to figure out what to do at 2 in the morning. You sent money. I sent everything else. So you decided you were owed. I decided I'd earned something. Ryan's voice rose, raw now, stripped of the rehearsal Ethan had heard in every conversation before this one. You got to leave and become the hero who saved the family from far away. I got to stay and become the one who did the actual work, and nobody ever once asked what that cost me. So yes, I took some of it. I told myself it was fair. I told myself you'd never even notice, out there with your business and your money and your life that never had to smell like a hospital room. The room went quiet. Ethan sat with it. The resentment beneath every reassuring phone call, the years of quiet control dressed up as care, a decade of trust built on a foundation his brother had been hollowing out the entire time. That doesn't make it fair, Ethan said. It makes it deliberate. Ryan said nothing. For the first time, he didn't try to explain it away. The night after the meeting in Sarah's office, Ethan sat with Kevin on their parents' back porch, the two of them quiet for a long while before either spoke. Part of me wants to bury him, Kevin admitted. Take everything from him the way he took from them. I thought about that too. Ethan looked out at the yard. The north lot beyond it gone now, sold to someone who'd probably never know what it had cost to lose. But that's not what fixes anything. It just adds another wound to the pile. They called Sarah the next morning and told her what they wanted. Not a scorched earth pursuit, but accountability. Restitution wherever it could be recovered. Formal charges on the forged deed, since that was a matter for the law to decide, not the family. And distance, real distance, until Ryan proved through actions rather than explanations that he understood what he'd done. Sarah filed the civil claim within the week, alongside a formal report to the district attorney's office regarding the forgery. She was careful, methodical, walking Robert and Linda through each step so they never felt like bystanders in their own case. For their parents, the more immediate relief came faster. Ethan set up a new account, one only he and Sarah's office could access, with automatic payments for medication, utilities, and groceries built directly into the structure, so no single person could ever again stand between the money and the people it was meant to protect. Robert's prescriptions were refilled in full for the first time in over a year. Linda's ring, redeemed from the pawn shop the same week the case was filed, sat back on her finger, catching the light when she moved her hands. Watching her turn it absently at the kitchen table one evening, Ethan understood that this, not punishment, not vindication, was what he'd actually been fighting for all along. 6 months later, the porch light worked again. Ethan noticed it the way he noticed everything now. carefully, the way a man checks the things he once assumed would just take care of themselves. He'd replaced the fixture himself the week he'd stayed to help set up the new accounts, and it had stayed lit every evening since, a small steady thing against the dark. Inside, Linda hummed while she cooked, the sound drifting from the kitchen the way it used to when he was a boy. Robert sat at the table going over a crossword, his color better, his hands steadier, a full week of proper insulin behind him, and for once ahead of him too. Kevin arrived Sunday afternoons now, a habit that had started out of necessity and settled into something neither of them questioned anymore. They didn't talk much about Ryan. The case moved forward on its own schedule, handled by people whose job it was to handle it, and the brothers had made peace with letting it. Instead, they talked about ordinary things. A job Kevin was considering, a trip Ethan was planning to take his parents on, once Robert's doctor gave the go-ahead. The kind of conversations that used to feel impossible between them back when silence was easier than honesty. Ethan thought sometimes about that first evening on the porch, the rotted step giving beneath his foot, his father's hands hiding something in a drawer. He'd come home expecting to find the family he'd left behind waiting exactly where he'd left it. What he'd found instead was harder and truer than that. That love sent from a distance isn't the same as love that shows up, and that the people who truly belong to you aren't decided by blood alone, but by who stays close enough to notice when you're quietly falling apart and stays anyway.